Hey, everybody. I hope there's still some people here. Sorry about that. It's still kind of a little bit crazy here. I think we're going to be okay. Um, from where I'm at, I'm on the northwest edge of the city, and everything's happening south um, of the city, like even across the river. The Illinois River runs right through where I live. And so um, the river always seems to save us when we get these really bad storms. They break it at the river and they kind of split, and part goes north and part goes south. But usually when we have these tornadic ones, um, I mean, I can think of maybe 3 times in my entire life where we've actually had one in the city. Usually they go south of the city. We had a really bad one back in 2017. I'm sorry, 2013. Washington, Illinois was hit with an EF4, and it was horrific. It was a horrific tornado. Um, but anyway, I'm I'm here, and we'll try to um, get through it together. I did not know that this weather was coming. For some reason today, I think I had heard that we might have some weather, but it wasn't anything that I was particularly worried about at all. Um, and so it kind of caught me off guard a little bit. I do follow an internet. Sorry, I do follow a YouTuber. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him or not, but Ryan Hall. I do follow him, and he was just covering everything about us on his channel. Um, he is amazing. If you guys don't know about him, I'm going to drop um, his channel in the chat, because it's a really good channel for you guys to watch if you are wanting to get weather and you end up losing your um, power or whatever. You can watch them on your phone. So it's pretty nice, and he covers the whole country. So it's not like you're just getting your local area. He covers all of it. So John, if you're still here, thank you so much for being here. Um, Indy Pam, thank you so much. I hope if you're still here, I'm okay. Um, hey, Tech Death, I think it's coming. It's maybe coming your way, or it may be heading more north. It might miss you. I'm not sure. Hi, Dave. How are you? Hey, Deb. How are you? Hi, Janet Gregory. Hey, Derek. How are you? I'm uh, I'm taking it easy. The real loud thunder has stopped, so maybe it's moving out of the area now. It was fast moving. I know they said it was pretty fast moving. I do know that one of the storm chasers that I was watching on Ryan Hall's channel, he got stuck down by Lewistown, which is it's probably an hour southeast of where I'm at, and he he got hit by the tornado and lost his windshield. They had softball size hail, he said, hit their car, and then they showed it on Ryan's channel. It was pretty awful. So I'm glad I didn't have that kind of hail here. I don't really need that kind of damage to my roof. Hey, Melissa, how are you? Hey, Miss Siren, how are you? Welcome. Hi, CJK. Hey, Shane, how are you? Hi, Mandy Ray. Hey, Bossy. Hey, Mitzi Scott. Julian Friend, how are you? Thank you, guys. Um, Yeah, it seems to have quieted down a lot, a lot, a lot, and I'm happy about that because, hang on, I'm just sending my daughter a message. She was gonna, join me tonight on the live stream, um, or at least she was gonna mod for me in chat, and I don't know what's happening now, but, hey, Purdue, how are you? Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. You guys are sweet. I am too. I'm glad I am too. It's like, you know, so much crazy. The weather's been ridiculous. Um, so yeah, my Indiana friends and neighbors, unfortunately, I think this stuff might be heading your way, but it looked it looks like it was going southeast, so not sure. Just keep yourselves abreast of the weather. Yeah, I watched that, Bossy. I was watching Ryan's coverage of that whole night, that whole storm on Friday, and it was just insane. We had it bad, and we had some really we had hail and stuff, but it wasn't, and really bad wind. But man, when it went into Indiana, uh it got nasty. So I always worry about that because the eastern part of Illinois, we have so many cornfields and so many open areas and spaces, those storms can gather strength. And so a lot of times that's what happens. And then as they leave the state, they're nasty. So oh wow. I'm just trying to catch my breath, guys. I was worried. I wanted to make sure I knew where Finn was. And he's right here sitting on my router. So he's close to me. So I was didn't want him to be too far away so I could grab him if I needed to. um so how is everybody else? How's everybody doing tonight? Um I was trying to figure out what I was going to do my show about tonight. Um so um I ran across a couple of things and it made me decide that I was going to do it on the topic that I posted, which was from local tragedy to international social media circus. Um, and so I thought it would be good to talk about some of this with this case because I think it's happening more and more. And even though we want cases to get coverage and we want cases to um, be able to be discussed and so on and so forth, I think there is a line that should not be crossed in that manner. I do apologize. I lost power at one point, and when I did, and I went to I have double monitors, and when I went to one of my monitors, I actually closed out a document where I had a ton of stuff that I was going to share with you guys tonight, and it's all gone. So I'm I'm gonna wing it the best that I can through this. So just bear with me, and I do apologize. I'm so sorry. Excuse me. Thanks, Deb. I'm glad that I am too. I hope everybody in the southeast portion of the county and over in Tazewell County are safe as well, and in Fulton County. I heard that Fulton County is where the tornado touched down first. So I'm hoping there wasn't much damage. A lot of farming communities over that way, a lot of small little towns, and that kind of thing. So when Abby and Libby went missing back in February of 2017, the Delphi murders were basically just a local tragedy. They were on the local news, they were on the Indianapolis news, and they were on the news here in Central Illinois. They were quickly picked up on social media and people started talking about it. But there was an article written by Aha Romano out from Vox. And this article is really good. And I'm going to pick up some points that this person wrote about because I think that they had a lot of good things to say. But basically what they started talking about was how the investigation into the murders of Libby and Abby sums up the messy state of true crime as it is right now. This person got unsolicited photographs in their inbox of the supposed crime scene. And they state that the photographs are not graphic, but very disturbing. And they were allegedly taken at the scene of the murders, which I just don't buy it because I just don't see law enforcement allowing that stuff to slip out. But anyway, with that being said, the person who sent these to the journalist said they were a whistleblower, and that's what they called themselves. And he runs one or several of a slew of anonymous accounts who've recently been contacting reporters, YouTubers, true crime podcasters in an effort to get someone to publish these allegedly exclusive photos. And I guess the assumption is that as a reporter who covers the stories of this type, they'd be interested. And this particular journalist said, no, I'm not. But this is one of the things that can happen when a murder or murders in America stops being a local tragedy and becomes true crime. It's really, really hard to describe Delphi from an outsider looking in a lot of different ways. There's so many facets to this case. There's the murders. There's the town itself. There's the whole crux of the investigation. There's this online community of enthusiasts who have made it their mission to bring justice or their version of justice to the case. And there are a lot of complex interactions with all of this. With the town, with the investigators, with the online community, with the families. It's just vast. We all would probably agree that the Delphi murder case is extremely tragic. I don't think there's anybody out there who would argue that this case is almost too tragic to put into words. It's also complicated and a bit messy. And as Doug Carter says, it has many tentacles. For me, all of the recent big cases, of all of them, I think that the Delphi case erupted, and we've talked about this, into this enormous community of all of these people online from all of these different applications: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, who all want justice for these girls. But oftentimes, they're all too at odds with one another for any of it to make sense. And when you take a look at it as an outsider, it's very easy to see how the case erupted and how it got so complex. We have audio and images of the alleged killer, and they were made available to the public so quick after the murders. And that is why this case went viral. Everything happened after that. In the 6 years that I've been covering this case, we have seen 2 sketches that were supposedly compiled by witnesses, a long chain of hotly debated suspects. I mean, a lot of names out there. There have been multiple side investigations that have splintered off into different crimes from this case. And the massive online sideshow and one strangely unsatisfying arrest of a local man who made himself known to police on the very first day. Delphi is still troubling to many and is still a very disturbing mystery. There are so many unanswered questions in this case. And as difficult as it is for us to wrap our minds around that, it's worth breaking down or taking a look at, in my opinion. Because as eerie and ugly as this case is, it's also very significant. Not just for the complexity of the case and this media circus that has formed around it, but because in all of this messy craziness that we've seen over the 6 years, I think it points the way towards what the future of true crime is going to be and how complicated that will be. Carroll County, for those who are brand new here and are not familiar with the Delphi murder case, or who may be watching this on replay and are not familiar, Carroll County, Indiana is a very tiny farming community located in northern central Indiana with a population of 2,972. And in my opinion, because I grew up rural and in the country, you know, Delphi's kind of as rural as it gets. It's small. Everybody knows everybody. Near the northern edge of the town lies the Monon High Bridge Trail, which is a walking trail or walking path that runs southeast to the Monon High Bridge, which is a trestle bridge that has been abandoned since the late 80s or early 90s. It's massive, this bridge. It's the second tallest bridge in the state of Indiana. It has absolutely no railings on it. It sits 63 feet in the air from the creek bed, and it's 853 feet long. And to think about it, if you're on this bridge and you're walking across it, it would be so easy to slip and fall and tumble through one of the holes in the railroad ties that have crumbled away over the years of all of the elements that it has gone through. There are many missing railroad ties on this bridge. The bridge is terrifying to me. I can't even imagine anyone walking across it. I have a horrific fear of heights myself. So especially open type heights like that, there is absolutely no way that I would be able to walk that bridge. And technically that bridge was off limits to the public. But you know how teenage kids are going to be. You know, they found the bridge cool and a great place to hang out, take pictures, and just be kids. Families would go to the Deer Creek, which runs below the bridge in the summer, and kids would go swimming. They would, have family picnics. Some people fished with their families there. I mean, it's not uncommon to see people in this area. It was a known place, definitely to the teenagers. But one of the things that is interesting about this whole area is that not all of the locals knew about it. There have been locals who were interviewed since the Delphi murders that stated that they were unaware of the bridge and didn't know that it was back there. And honestly, if you didn't know it wasn't there, it would be really hard to see or find. The girls were actually found on private property, however. The property they were found on, as we all know that followed the case, belonged to Ron Logan, who is a longtime Delphi resident, lived there for well over 53 years in the same home. And he is one of those persons of interest that became aware early on to law enforcement in the very few early days of this case. So much so that he was on the radar of the FBI. So on February 13th, 2017, it was a sunny Monday in February, and it was warmer than seasonally it should have been. But it wasn't extremely warm. It didn't get extremely warm until later in the week, but it was a little bit warmer than normal. It was in the high upper 40s, low 50s. In February in the Midwest, that is still a brisk day, in my opinion, even if the sun is out. But you know how kids are? I mean, anytime, that they can run and get out there and do something, they're going to want to do that. And the girls decided that they wanted to obviously have some fun. And they were best friends, Abby and Libby. And they asked Libby's oldest sister, Libby's older sister, Kelsey, to drop them off at the trail. And according to Becky Patty, Libby's grandmother, she said that Kelsey and Libby frequently hung out at the bridge, hiking, taking photos. They would geocache there, which had become a big thing in the years prior to the murders. So it wasn't a concern for Kelsey to drop the two girls off shortly before 2 and be on her way. She had other things planned and she had to be at work later that day. Libby's dad, Derek, had intended to pick them up in about an hour and a half to 2 hours later. He was going out of town to Franklin, Indiana to do some work for his mother's business and run some errands. As Abby and Libby were crossing the bridge, Libby turned back and posted a couple of photos of the bridge and of Abby on the bridge, because it was Abby's first time on the bridge, to Snapchat. And it would be the last time that anyone would hear from the girls in any manner. And that photograph is kind of iconic around this case. The girls continued and walked to the southeast end of the bridge, and at which point the trail effectively ends there. It just basically ends and becomes brush. Libby's camera captured footage briefly of a man in a blue coat and jeans walking along the bridge toward them. And as Libby continued recording, what started out as speculation seems to have turned to fear. A 2022 arrest affidavit eventually reveals that one of the girls, likely Abby, murmured "gun" as the man approached them. I can't even imagine the fear that both of those girls felt in that moment. They were trapped between this man and the woods. And there was a huge steeping hill on either side of them. And there was no way they could get back across the bridge. And they were cornered. The next thing that happened is he says, "Guys, down the hill." A 2017 search warrant revealed in 2022 confirmed the existence of a chilling 43-second video of almost total silence following those words, during which the girls were marched to their deaths. By the time Libby's father reportedly called her at 3:11 p.m. to say that he was on his way to pick them up, the girls had likely already been abducted and possibly murdered. The family quickly formed search parties, and at 5:20 p.m., Libby and Abby were officially reported missing. Many people were on the High Bridge Trail that day, and several of them came forward that same afternoon, but none of them reported seeing what happened to Abby or Libby. And around noon the next day, Valentine's Day 2017, the girls would be found lying about a half a mile from the bridge across the stretch of private property belonging to Ron Logan, about 50 feet from the Deer Creek. The widely accepted but as yet unconfirmed details of what happened to them are horrific and bizarre. Some authorities believing that the bodies could have been moved and staged. And this has prompted theories that the girls were placed in the creek after the initial searches on the 13th were called off for the evening. But again, this is just myriads of speculation in a case that, quite honestly, became a mini head of warring beliefs, many heads, agendas, and endless theories, and very, very few answers. That was definitely frustrating in the beginning. It seemed that there were an abundance of leads coming in after the still photo and the audio of this man on the bridge was put out on the airwaves. Thousands upon thousands of leads were pouring in, but no suspects. Local law enforcement told us, obviously, in the very beginning, in those very first few days, after they were there at the crime scene, that they felt that the case would be solved rather quickly. We heard this from Jerry Holman. We heard this from who was the lead investigator. We heard this from Robert Ives, who was the prosecutor. And we even heard this from Tobe Lesenby, who was the sheriff. Everybody thought, including the FBI, that the Delphi murders should have been easy to solve. They had a full, even though blurry, video of the perpetrator. They had a recording of his voice. How could someone in such a small community not recognize him immediately, right? Well, as we all know, that's not what happened. Using the footage that Libby captured of the abduction in progress, police quickly released the now famous double photo of the man the internet went on to dub Bridge Guy. These still photos were recounted as the suspect. When they first put them out, they said that he was just a person that they needed to speak to, that they felt he might have information that they needed in regards to the case. But just 3 days later, they would officially call him their suspect, and that they believed he was responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. 9 days after they were murdered, the police released the audio recording of Bridge Guy saying "down the hill." And I believe and agree with the author of the Faxx article that this was arguably the moment when this case stopped being solely a hometown tragedy and entered the annals of true crime fame. We had this pixelated image of this killer. We had this disembodied audio that was so eerie because it was just 3 words. And it swept across media outlets nationwide, and it galvanized interest in their story of how these 2 young best friends died so brutally side by side, neither one leaving the other. The day after the release of the recording, police had to divert tips in the case to a national call center run by the FBI's Major Case Contact Center. And by early March, the case had already received over 11,000 leads from across the country. 11,000. And that was just weeks after they were murdered. There are some cases that never get those kind of tips. Basically, that was the land speed record for interest. According to the defense attorney, Bob Mata, who hosts the Defense Diaries podcast. He said, "This is the rare case that law enforcement wanted to go viral. Police turned to the wider public in the hope of generating leads. And when public interest waned, they kept the case on the national media radar by doling out new tidbits of information." At the same time, though, the police seemed to clamp down hard when it came to providing vital information or context for the information that they shared. It's almost as if confusion was the embodiment of the information that was being provided. Even 6 years later, there's scant information on the official Indiana State Police tip page. And a spokesperson for the Indiana State Police is unable to comment on the investigation due to the recent gag order by the court. The little information that the police did reveal was often so confusing and so baffling, and quite frankly, even contradictory in many instances. It left all of us just scratching our heads as to what they were doing. This left the public with no real guidelines for how we could be helpful, which may have rendered us anything but helpful. I heard it said many, many times over on Reddit when we were all baffled by the confusion with the sketches and the audio and the video and why it all wasn't released right away, and it was doled out almost like little bites of baby food here and there to us to keep us interested. The first police sketch was a really wow moment for a lot of people, and it awakened absolute chaos. On July 17th, 2017, authorities released a sketch of a suspect that was supposedly based on an eyewitness sighting. The Indiana State Police Sergeant Kim Riley, public information officer, informed the public at a press conference that authorities believe this to be the same person captured in the still photographs from Libby's video, also known as Bridge Guy. This sketch opened the floodgates for online guesswork. Just 2 days after this sketch was released, the Indiana State Police was cautioning armchair sleuths as ourselves to stop posting side-by-side images of this suspect sketch and random men on social media. Now, we all know that that did not happen. That continued for 6 years. The online suspicion was often aimed at the victims' families. It seems that the German family members and Patty family members were more targeted in this regard, as well as unaffiliated Delphi residents and men across the United States, anyone and everyone who bore a passing resemblance to the man on the bridge or to this sketch of the man on the bridge was open season. 2 Delphi residents who have the same name both experienced intense harassment after multiple true crime podcasters hinted at the involvement of one of them, again, based on nothing more than pure speculation. Multiple people that have been spoken to with lamented the current state of online sleuthing around this case, but blamed the pointed but incomplete information that was coming out on the case from law enforcement. And it led to anarchy online, in chat rooms, in Reddit forums, in YouTube live streams, on Instagram, and on TikTok. People lost their minds. I wasn't really drawn into the online community in this case as much as I think I was pushed into it. I had never heard of Reddit before. I had someone tell me when they knew that I was following this case that I should check out Reddit. There was probably a good community there that was talking about the case. And I thought, oh, well, that would be interesting. And lo and behold, I ended up in the Delphi subs on Reddit. It wasn't long, 4 months, maybe. I quickly learned that people online were vicious. And I couldn't believe some of the things that was being said and what was being done on these forums. And I started thinking about it and I was like, well, what's the reason for this? And why is this happening? Is it because there's such a vacuum of information coming from law enforcement? Is that what is leading to this behavior? Does this happen with other cases? I mean, all of these questions were in my mind. Robbie Coleman, who is a 36-year-old Indianapolis web sleuth, told Vox this was the only avenue for learning anything for years. And that's pretty much the truth, because law enforcement wasn't talking. And they weren't saying much. Even when they were having press conferences those first couple of years, they were not saying much. And then April 22nd, 2019 happens. And all hell breaks loose. Before this date, the frenzy and interest in this case was everywhere. People everywhere were talking about it online. If you were in the true crime community and following it all, there was no way that you could not have seen or heard something about Abby and Libby and their case. But there was no significant developments that happened in the case. Then on April 22nd, 2019, authorities unveiled an onslaught of information to the public. They announced that they were going to have this press conference, and they made us wait. Then, only minutes before they took the podium, they called the families into a private room and told them and showed them what they were revealing. Becky Patty would say that it felt like a gut punch, like someone kicked her in the gut. Because among the reveals was an amended audio clip of the killer in which he could be heard saying one extra word, "guys," down the hill. And a 2-second video clip of the image they'd previously provided the stills of And both of these clips raised more questions than they answered. But the most puzzling of all was they revealed a new suspect sketch, reportedly that was drawn back in 2017, just a couple of days after the murders. What? How can that be? We all thought that. What in the world is going on here? How can they have this sketch a couple of days after the murders and not release it? Why did they wait almost 6 months to reveal the original Bridge Guy sketch? Those questions were bombarded in videos, live streams, chat rooms, forums, all over the internet. People ran wild with speculation. But authorities told us that they were replacing the old sketch. But then, no, they stopped short of that and said, no, let's clarify. This is an entirely new suspect. A man in his mid-20s to 30s. And he is the man on the bridge. Now, we don't want you to forget about the first sketch, but it's going to become secondary. Oh, Jamie, that's awesome. Thank you so much. The old Bridge Guy or original Bridge Guy sketch looked to be probably in his 40s or 50s. And Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, he described it as the investigation was going to be shifting gears to a different investigative strategy. But he never told us what that strategy was, of course. He also spoke directly to the killer that day and said, "You never thought that we would change directions, but we did." Almost as if they knew who they were talking to. And if you look back on it, it almost feels that way, like they knew who they were talking about. And what infuriated so many of us and made us all question if law enforcement even had any kind of a clue as to what they were doing was this truly seemed to bring the case back to square one. And I told so many people that asked me, both in emails and just in conversation, we lost 2 years in this case from appearances. It appears as if they were starting over in 2019 and going back to the beginning. So when people were complaining back in 2021 and 2022 that it had been 6 years, I was like, no, it's truly really only been 4 or 3, because you have to stop and think about that. They lost all of that time, or so it seemed. People were excited. What did this mean? Did this mean that they knew who Bridge Guy was, they were onto him, and there would soon be an arrest? Well, sadly, that didn't happen. The about face in this case in 2019 seemed to fade quickly, just as quickly as it grabbed the momentum that it had at the press conference. There were 2 more years that passed before there was a significant update in the case, or at least one that seemed significant at the time. 2 more years we went without any information. And I've often told you and said that whenever there is a void of information, we as human beings are going to fill that void, because that's what we do. In December of 2021, authorities announced that they had an online catfishing account, Anthony_shots. And they wanted to know if there was anyone out there who had interacted with it or met with them in person. And if so, would they please contact authorities? And they left the Abby and Libby tip line number to be called. And they said it was an update in the Abby and Libby case. This came on a Monday night around 9:30 at night. It was the craziest way to release information any of us had heard before. And we couldn't quite figure it out. The next morning, a local station in an investigative reporter in Indianapolis revealed, well, we already know about the Anthony Shots profile that they're asking about because he's been in jail and been arrested by them since August of 2020. What? August of 2020? That cannot be true. What is happening here? Everybody scrambled to find out what they could about this man named Kagan Klein, a 27-year-old resident of nearby Peru, Indiana, who had been linked to this Anthony_shots profile. In fact, he admitted to being the creator of this said profile. Law enforcement authorities have never, ever named Klein as a person of interest in this investigation. In fact, they went as far as telling him in an interrogation that they knew that he was not responsible for this crime. But they did make it clear that they thought there was some sort of a connection. He would be brought up and prosecuted or arrested on 30 charges related to the possession of child sexual abuse material and child exploitation. Four months ago, 5 of those charges were dismissed. He's scheduled to go to trial in May of 2023. However, just this past week, he pled guilty to all 25 charges, and now he awaits his sentencing. In early February of 2022, Indiana State Police Doug Carter did an interview with ABC News, in which he stated, in what was certainly news to those following the case, that police know a lot about the killer, without saying anything about what or who that might mean. In fact, he spoke directly to the killer again and told him that they were coming. After Carter's interview, ambivalence from law enforcement again enabled the web sleuths of this case to start filling in those gaps with chaos. On numerous subreddits and other forums, hordes of leakers were touting exclusive insider intel, and they were spouting arcane theories built around regional gossip and local politics. There were law enforcement cover-ups, drug ring conspiracies, sheriffs with tunnel vision, former prosecutors with vendettas, judges who were on the take, officers maligned for doing their jobs too well, an investigation driven more by the coming of local elections rather than a pursuit of justice. Every murder in a small town trope you can foist onto one crime. So to even be able to read most of these Delphi forums, you guys, you had to learn a glossary of acronyms and shorthand lingo. In fact, when I created my Reddit sub, Delphi's Daughters, I went as far as creating a list of some of these acronyms so that people coming in that were new to the case would know what the heck was being talked about when they would go into these forums or would want to comment on a post. BG was known as Bridge Guy. Flannel Shirt Guy, one of the witnesses supposedly seen on the bridge, became FSG. Old Bridge Guy, which was the first sketch released, became OBG. And Young Bridge Guy was the second sketch released, but the first sketch that was done became YBG. Law enforcement was known as LE, and MBW became Muddy and Bloody Woman. An endless parade of other people referred to only by their initials because we don't dox people. It's not morally right to put people's names out there and accuse them of a crime with no evidence. Because we are not law enforcement and we have no right to do that, right? Sorry, I'm getting hot. I'm going to turn on my fan. I was so cold. Now I'm hot. Anyone who decides, okay, I still think I want to get involved in this case and decides they're going to look into it, they're going to find themselves invested in this case. And they're going to definitely find themselves joining in the rampant, furious finger pointing that accompanies it. We all have been suckered into that at one point or another, all of us. And one of the most polarizing constituents in all of this was the murder sheet. And we all know who the murder sheet is that follow the case. But for those who do not, the murder sheet was a podcast based out of Indiana, basically Indianapolis, by a husband and wife team who originally met and bonded over true crime. They started a podcast, The Murder Sheet, based on the Burger Chef murders that happened in Indianapolis that have never been solved. Anya Kane is a former senior retail reporter at Insider. And Kevin Greenlee, an attorney, wanted to bring their professional roles to the podcast. When interviewed recently, Anya says the show focused on journalism that furthers your understanding of the case. They've arguably been successful because they've gotten several exclusives. They're the ones who excavated the 2017 search warrant of the property where the girls were ultimately found. Suspicions against that property owner, Ron Logan, have lingered and continue to run rampant. And Logan was never named a person of interest, and he died in January of 2022 due to complications from COVID-19. Online, however, despite Anya Kane's long journalism career, and perhaps because they began as true crime fans, Some sleuths see them as little more than glorified Redditors. And then there becomes the issue of money. The podcast is self-sustaining, just barely. And Kane and Greenlee have recently gone full-time. So they quit their jobs to do this full-time. That move in turn invites criticism that the podcasters are exploiting these tragedies for personal gain. Yet the Murder Sheet is far from the only monetized true crime project focused on this case. One forum advertises a secretive community with exclusive access to private information from law enforcement. It's $20 to join, and the owner told Vox he made over $5,000 from the entry fees alone. The massive growth of the true crime industry means more and more people than ever are engaging in this space, and not always ethically. One popular podcast curtailed controversy when it aired a series of episodes in which the host put forth speculation about a random Delphi resident with no known connection to the crime. The Murder Sheet's biggest find arguably came in 2022, which was a transcript of a police interview with Kegan Kline. The interview contained a wealth of new information, yet the pair came under fire from other podcasters and onlookers for leaking information and reportedly initially leaving in an unredacted identifying detail. The transcript itself, however, provided us with the first substantiated link between Kline and the Delphi murders. Kegan Kline admitted in it to having previously interacted with Libby German. No one knew that before this transcript. The flurry of online activity stood in stark contrast to the radio silence that we had all been hearing from law enforcement for all these years. And by 2022, even the victims' families were voicing their frustrations. Libby's mother said they don't know what they're doing last May. In October of that year, however, the state of the case abruptly changed with a surprising and confounding arrest. And this arrest brought a whole new set of questions. On October 26, 2022, authorities arrested the Delphi resident Richard Matthew Allen, a 50-year-old CVS pharmacy employee with no criminal record. A few days later, authorities confirmed the arrest in a frustratingly brief press conference. It took a month for the arrest affidavit to be unsealed, revealing the stunning truth behind Allen's arrest. And we all had our mouths dropped to the floor. Richard Allen had actually gone to police in 2017, shortly after the murders, and identified himself as having been on the bridge on February 13th, at the time that Abby and Libby were there. Why had it taken so long to find him? The media reportedly blamed the snafu on the FBI, hinting that a filing error by a civilian FBI employee led to the delay. Is it possible that it's really that simple, you guys? Did the investigation spin its wheels for 5 years for no reason at all? The most overwhelming evidence for Allen's guilt is that he places himself on the bridge, and he looks like Bridge Guy. According to the affidavit, Allen's self-identified outfit of a blue jacket and jeans matched that of the suspect. This could, on one hand, be highly damning circumstantial evidence if he didn't realize that Libby German had caught him on camera, he'd think nothing of placing himself on the bridge, right? Well, then again, he was arguably wearing one of the most generic outfits in Indiana, a blue Carhartt jacket and jeans. The multiple eyewitness sightings of Bridge Guy are consistent with Richard Allen. One woman claimed to have seen a man who fits Richard Allen's description looking muddy and bloody. And then there are the ballistics. According to the affidavit, an unspent shell casing was found lying between the bodies of the two victims, a casing investigators were able to match to Allen's own Sig Sauer gun. There's no mention in the affidavit of DNA. So this could be the best forensic evidence the state presents. But that doesn't mean they don't have DNA. They may just not have put it in the affidavit. There are several problems with this, however. For starters, the entire field of ballistics evidence is increasingly considered to be subjective pseudoscience rather than legitimate forensics. And even among already shaky ballistics, matching an individual gun cartridge to an unspent casing is an extremely rare type of evidence. And in an interview with the Murder Sheet, one anonymous criminal defense attorney said he'd never seen an unspent shell casing presented as evidence in a trial. The probable cause affidavit has divided followers of the murders into camps. And we all saw this throughout this whole chaos of a case. But now that Richard Allen has been arrested, it's even more so. Allen's defense released a strongly worded rebuttal to it, pointing out the many gaps in the investigation. Meanwhile, the case is under a gag order, which means no more information will be forthcoming until the trial. The first hearing was recently delayed because the prosecution had yet to turn over all of its evidence to the defense. There is a ton of pages of discovery. A ton. You know what? If Allen is Bridge Guy, then his role in the crime raises so many questions. Was he acting alone, as prosecutors have claimed? Was he acting with others? Is Kegan Kline still somehow connected to these murders? If Ron Logan was the original hot choice for Bridge Guy, as indicated in the search warrant for his property, why didn't law enforcement pursue him as a person of interest more diligently? And why did Allen continue living in Delphi, even keeping his clothes from the day of the homicides as though nothing had happened? If there's little forensic evidence tying Allen to the crime, then the abundance of alternate suspects could present a goldmine for his defense. And meanwhile, web sleuths continue pursuing their own agendas to the point that even if Allen is found guilty, there will likely be plenty who reject the verdict. You need to accept that Ron Logan is Bridge Guy, the whistleblower tells the Vox author. When asked about the lack of evidence, he retorts, "I don't care about evidence. There's no such thing as evidence." He has a point. If there's anything true crime teaches us, it's that facts, circumstances, evidence, proof, doubt, and truth are all often in the eye of the beholder. There's a million Scott Petersons out there. Defense Diaries, Mata says, referring to the convicted family annihilator whose guilt has lately been a trendy topic of debate. If people start digging, they're going to find warts on every single case. He feels like there will be no narrative resolution. It's going to always be left for us to wonder. And I myself had a long conversation with True Crime Maria about this very topic before Richard Allen was ever arrested. I said to her, Maria, when this case is finally resolved and we have an arrest or arrests, there are so many camps that believe this person did it and this person did it, and they're willing to fight to the death on that hill, that people aren't going to trust it. People aren't going to believe it. And people are always going to be left to wonder. And yet, ironically, as CJ Hoyt, news director for the Indianapolis news station Fox 59 and CBS 4 pointed out, if Allen is guilty, it won't be in any way because of the years of obsessive work by armchair detectives. I think any exposure can be good, he said, but there are elements that can clearly be harmful, and especially to the victims' families. An example of that would be the person trying to sell crime scene photos. But like most cases, the online community didn't factor in at all when it came to solving it, if Allen is, in fact, the killer. Richard Allen was on no one's radar. No one in the true crime community had Richard Allen on their radar. And that might be the biggest irony of all. Because however obstructing or counterproductive or messy web sleuths efforts are, every person this reporter spoke to says they do it not because of the game, the thrill of the chase, or the clout, but because of Abby and Libby. The girls who had a sleepover the night before and woke up early that morning to eat pancakes and were excited about having a day off school. They helped Libby's grandmother with filing papers in exchange for pocket change so that they could go shopping later that afternoon after the bridge. Last year, I took my own kids to the bridge, Coleman said. I didn't tell them what happened. They thought it was just a neat little hike. But they did notice the teddy bears and the memorials, and they asked me about them. But I kept it at arm's length. But I needed that to keep perspective, to make it real. A lot of the people in these groups need their own moment like that. And even those farthest down the rabbit hole say they're doing it for the girls. I believe the girls are watching this, the whistleblower tells me. I believe the girls are helping. Still, empathy only extends so far. When he talks about the mother of Libby German, he's derisive. She's blocked. We don't care about her. Then he tosses in an aside. He wants me to know he knows who killed Natalie Wood. So, how in the world does a local family tragedy turn into a social media circus? I think we just found out how that happens. All of the crazy twists and turns in a case can make things unbelievably frustrating. And in the vastness of that frustration comes with it crazy speculation, off the wall theories, and people out for no good. I often said when I started my channel that I wanted it to be fact-based, and I didn't want to swirl around in the pool of all of the crazy speculation. Still, I was right there with everybody thinking that the information that was given to us about the Kleins really meant something and really added up to something. And the more I look at it and the more I go back over it and the more I look at everything in this, I'm like, we don't have enough information to make those assumptions. We just don't. The only way we're going to have that information is when law enforcement verifies what they have and what they know. And Doug Carter has told us there are many tentacles to this case, and one day he hopes to tell us the whole story and how things happened the way they did, and it'll be really interesting to hear his narrative on it. What the average person out there doesn't understand or seems to forget is that law enforcement is running an investigation. And anytime you run an investigation into something, you have to keep things close to the vest. You do not want to show your hand, especially when you're looking for a criminal or someone who has murdered someone, and especially 2 little girls. You don't want to give them your hand and let them know what you know. Again, why they have absolutely kept the crime scene under wraps. It's hard. It's hard to stay focused year after year. A lot of times I think about what the Kristen Smart family had gone through. Her case was just resolved last October. And Paul Flores was charged with her murder. He was the last person to see Kristen Smart alive. And he was the first person that law enforcement honed in on as being responsible, or most likely to be responsible. And still, it took 26 years for them to bring him to justice. I used to wonder if that's what we were going to be looking at in the Delphi case. I am so glad that we haven't had to wait 26 years for justice for Abby and Libby. Moreover, I'm glad for Libby's family, Becky and Mike and Kelsey and Caleb and Anna and Derek and Carrie. Hey, Fig, how are you? Sending you my love, my dear. We have to keep plugging along on these cases, but we have to remember that when we're covering them, I've said it over and over again, these are real people and real people's lives, and we shouldn't be doing it for entertainment purposes. This isn't about entertainment. This is about education and about letting people know what's happening in a case. I look at what happened recently in the Alec Murdaugh trial and that case. I mean, it's just incredible how the true crime obsession with cases has become entertainment. I mean, we have all the new podcasts and documentaries, television series, and a lot of times the media obsession has started to become largely unproductive. And this genre has exploded. It has just literally exploded. And you have to be careful between an interest in true crime and glorification of it. Most recently, that Netflix documentary, Murdaugh Murders, A Southern Scandal, it came out less than 2 weeks before the official verdict in the case was reached. Do you think that that was planned? Or was that just an accident? Of course it was planned. And it wasn't the only one. Months earlier, a series following the same case premiered on HBO Max. The fast pace at which these series are being produced only brings more interest and more internet questioning and speculation across social media. And this is a familiar pattern for these platforms. And it's not the first time that they've used crime for viewership. Late last year, Netflix released Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, which received criticism for not contacting any of the victims' families about their show before they made it. In a personal essay written for Insider, Rita Isbell, the sister of one of Dahmer's victims, wrote that she wished Netflix would have asked them before creating that show. Whether or not the intended purpose is to highlight the victims' stories and have a positive impact, we truly have reached a point where many cause harm, more harm than good. Production companies and streaming services are ultimately looking for a story that is going to sell, despite the impact it has on those left behind or those who are really involved and living it day to day. When these companies prioritize entertainment value over impact, you can only expect the same from their audiences. People all over social media, but apparently and particularly on TikTok, seem to lose sight of the fact that they're talking about real people and actual events. As they blame suspects or speculate on different theories, publicized crime cases get treated more as if they're fiction. It's important to remember that despite what anybody might think or how much we speculate, TikTokers, YouTubers, and influencers are not experts in this area. And no matter how much they try to say they are, you guys, they aren't. The crimes that these people committed or the people they impacted will eventually become overshadowed by everybody's fascination with each detail of the case. As long as people continue engaging with this type of media, it's not going to stop. The true crime phenomenon begs the question of how people should go about consuming or creating media that puts bad people at the center of attention. You guys, I've told you over and over again, I hate the fact that we always remember the criminal's name, but we can very rarely say or remember the victims in these crimes. While I don't have a definite solution, I do think it's important to talk about and to be as respectful and caring as possible in these circumstances when we're discussing and talking about these cases. It might be best to pay attention to the people truly impacted by these things and listen to how they would like the story told. There are experts out there that believe that there is a biological reason why we're obsessed with true crime and true crime shows. Watching true crime shows may help prepare us if we find ourselves in a similar situation. And this was according to an expert on morbid curiosity. Colton Scrivener is a research scientist at Recreational Fear Lab, an expert in morbid curiosity. Feels there's an almost primal reason people are endlessly fascinated by true crime content. According to Scrivener, morbid curiosity about dangerous people likely began some 300,000 years ago when humans began using language and engaging in proactive aggression instead of reactive aggression. Now, this presents a problem for people because with proactive aggression, it's hard to tell who's plotting to harm you. So this puts a selection pressure on our minds to learn to seek out information about people who are potentially dangerous. True crime can have a learning component to it, or at least a perceived learning component. We feel like we're more prepared in these kinds of situations. So if this dangerous situation were to occur, you feel a little more prepared and know what you should or shouldn't do. And this claim is supported by research data. The new survey of 2,000 self-reported true crime fans found that 76% feel that consuming content about true crime helps them avoid similar situations happening to them. The average respondent consumes 5 true crime programs each month, with 75% saying they watch the latest program the instant it's released, and 71% saying they binge watch the entire thing in one sitting. The survey also found that 44% of respondents admit they have a favorite serial killer, and 67% would like the opportunity to chat with one. Over 7 in 10 of these polled, 71% also admitted to feeling less trustworthy of other people due to how much true crime content they consume. But can watching too much content about violent crime make one more likely to commit a violent crime? This expert says no. So there are distinctions between becoming desensitized to seeing graphic content on your television and being okay with graphic content happening to you or happening around you. A great example of this would be the research on violent video games over the course of the last 20 years. It was a huge deal because people were concerned that as video games became more realistic and as the violence became more realistic, that it would cause kids in particular to become more violent. But the research is pretty clear at this point that playing violent video games doesn't make kids more violent. I would be fairly sure that the same is true of something like true crime, where watching true crime doesn't make you less empathetic towards the victims or more empathetic towards the killer or anything like that. It might have some psychological effects, but it's very unlikely that it would have any effects along those lines, which I found to be extremely interesting. So I've had a true crime obsession since I was a teenager. I used to read true crime magazines and stories, and I just started following them. I think when I first read Helter Skelter, which was the book about the murders in 1969. Hold on a second. Hold on a second, guys. I'm sorry. Sorry. The Helter Skelter book was written by Vincent Bugliosi, who was the prosecutor for the Charles Manson and the Manson family murders. And I think that's probably what really got me started interested in true crime. I read it when I was in high school, but I lived it because I was 10 years old when the crimes happened, and I remember them being on the news. I remember seeing his followers with the swastikas inscribed on their foreheads. and their head shaved. And I couldn't understand why anyone would do that. And it made me interested. So most of true crime is centered on one brutal crime, murder. And not just your average murders. It's like people seek out the most bizarre and gruesome tales. The stories of serial killers, such as Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, the Son of Sam, Gary Ridgway. These are the ones we all know by heart. These are pretty heinous crimes. Robert Durst was pretty big on the list recently. And when they put out the true crime show, The Jinx, about how eccentric he was and creepy, if you ask me, the Making a Murderer Netflix series about the exoneration and subsequent murder conviction of Stephen Avery, everybody is obsessing over true crime. And research suggests that the general public's fascination with serial murder is much like our fascination with car crashes or natural disasters. It's pure spectacle and drama, and anything outside of the norm of our day-to-day lives is going to draw our attention. Another motivation could be that watching or listening to these stories gives us a jolt of adrenaline. Our bodies interpret adrenaline as a sort of reward. We can even become addicted to it. It's why so many thrill seekers jump out of airplanes and balance on tight ropes or jump off of cliffs and do all these crazy, dangerous things. What's an easier and safer way to achieve these highs? You guessed it, watch true crime. But perhaps the most powerful reason we're drawn to true crime is due to one of our most basic and powerful emotions, fear. Watching a TV show or listening to a podcast gives us the opportunity to experience this all at once and in a simple and complex emotion that is in a controlled environment. We can experience all of the excitement and the adrenaline that fear gives us, but since it's in the comfort of our own homes, we don't experience any of the negativity that inherently comes with it. Yet another reason that I love true crime is that I get to explore the psychology behind the act of murder. No sane person wants to commit mass murder, but by the very nature of being human, our brains are wired at least somewhat similarly to these criminals. So through watching, we are granted the opportunity to get inside the mind of a murderer. We cannot quite grasp the motivation and conviction of people who commit these violent acts, but we feel compelled to try to figure it out. An aspect of this true crime fascination that I find particularly interesting is that the majority are obsessed women. A 2010 study published by Social Psychological and Personality Science found that the majority of viewers for both true crime and crime fiction are women. Investigation Discovery, a network that runs documentary-style true crime shows 24 hours a day, is one of women's most watched cable networks on television. The very female-focused Oxygen Network has recently rebranded itself to focus mainly on true crime programming. The podcast My Favorite Murder, which is hosted by two women and frequently features tips on how women can stay safe, hit the #1 spot on iTunes within 6 months of its premiere. Why is this? The theory that I find most convincing as to why these shows are so popular among women is because They give us a way to ease our anxiety and prepare us for life's real threats. Most true crime that you hear about is perpetuated or perpetrated by men upon women. The vulnerability of that knowledge can often be terrifying. So learning about these crimes teaches us what to do to prevent any violent attacks. Always lock your doors and windows. Never walk home alone, and don't leave your drink unattended for any reason. Regardless whether you're watching true crime to ease your anxiety or pump some adrenaline into your day, or maybe a strange combination of both, there is no denying that true crime is here to stay. And if true crime is here to stay, comes with it a responsibility. And all I'm saying is that we all need to do better and to make sure that we're doing things for the right reasons and that we're all here for the right reasons, or otherwise do something else. Because the last thing you want to do is cause any more anguish to a family who has lost a loved one, or to the people that they have left behind, friends, communities. And God forbid innocent people that have had nothing to do with the crime at hand. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight. I know I didn't interact a lot with you tonight, but I had this agenda. I really wanted to get it all out. Thanks, Jamie. Oh, wow, that's wild. Yes, Mitzi, those pictures back on television are embedded in my mind. I have, like you said, so many of them. I remember I was dating when Son of Sam was going on, and it was almost scary to go out at night because you would wonder if that could happen to you, you know. Just so many different crazy things. You know, I was in high school when John Wayne Gacy was arrested, and it was all over the news here. And it was hard to believe that somebody could do that and get away with it for so long and live a separate life, which I just, like I said, I just really think that one of the things that we have to remember when we're asking ourselves questions about how could they have arrested Richard Allen? He's not Bridge Guy. They know so much more than we do. And also, just because you don't think he looks like Bridge Guy, or you don't think that he possibly acted like Bridge Guy, we don't know how these individuals act. And if we look back on people who've acted like this before, we all know that there's many of them, the psychopath, the sociopath, they can live two separate lives very easily. They can go out and murder and come home immediately and sit down and eat a hamburger with you at dinner. So I hope you guys all have a great and safe evening. For any of you listening where the weather might still be headed your way, please keep an ear and eye out. I hate that these storms hit at night when people are sleeping. It is so dangerous out there. I love all of you. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for supporting my channel, for being here and always giving me your utmost attention. You guys truly are the best. I have the best community. That's what I've heard, Miracle Heart. I'm hearing that we're supposed to have more tomorrow. I'm just like, I'm over it already, and it's the season has just gotten started. So I'm like, this is not good. And my little 5-year-old grandson, he is terrified of storms. He was fascinated by tornadoes for a couple of years. now he's not fascinated anymore. Now he's afraid of them. So I really feel like, you know, we can all, like I said, we can all do better. But anyway, thank you guys. Good night, everyone. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And I will see you on Thursday. On Thursday, I am going to be doing a live stream on the O.J. Simpson case. And I will be doing that with my daughter. So I hope to see you all there. Have a good one. Good night, everyone.